All right, we're live. Um, Calvin and I were actually just talking about content creation. And the thought that popped in my mind was, why, Calvin, why do you believe in making content?
Wow, great question. I believe in creating content because ah, it's just really fun. It's creative. I believe it's part of my core being almost. Um, I believe I'm a child of God, and God created the world, everything. And I don't know. I think it's just at the center of my being. It feels good to create something, when you when you start with nothing. Me, for example, with video editing, I start with nothing, go out, shoot some things, come back, put it all together, put music to it, sound effects, and then produce it. And it's just so fun to
Yeah,
see that you've just created something out of nothing.
yeah, that's that's interesting. I think we actually well, part of the reason I got into my interest in content creation was kind of from you, but I just realized the world's kind of full of darkness, and that sounds like a really um religious mumbo jumbo kind of term, but it really is to me. I mean, there's so much bad content being pushed, and I think it affects us psychologically so much. I mean, Instagram, I think people have been in denial about how much they're affected by Instagram, but if you really look at the studies, it's pretty crystal clear that suicide is highly related to Instagram, and people having low self-esteem highly related to Instagram. And it's not because Instagram itself is inherently evil. It's just that the kind of content we produce often leads people to feel inadequate. And I know. So yeah, similar thing. Like, being able to add more light to the world is always good. And that's what I tell everyone. They're like, "Do you think I should podcast?" I'm like, "Absolutely." Like, "Are you not worried about competition?" I'm like, "No, like that's not the reason I do this. I'm not like trying to be the top dog. Like,
Mhm.
we're not going to be hurt because more people share their voices about what they believe in. Like, that's not gonna hurt anybody." So
Love that. Love that. Yeah.
yeah.
So why do you like creating content?
I think everyone needs a creative outlet. You know, I don't paint, so I do podcasts. Like, and I really feel that way. Like, I think everyone, like, you're right though. I mean, I think that we're descendant of deity, so we are hardwired to create. I think that's why Minecraft is so addictive. I think that's why video games are so addictive, is because really, like, what is the fundamental reason people play video games? Yes, there's some camaraderie you can get into. Yes, there's a couple of things, but a lot of it is because you like to level up. Like, we are biologically programmed to want to level up every part of ourselves as quickly and as effectively as possible. That to me is kind of the root cause of it. So I think that I just want to create for the sake of adding my light to the world. You know, my voice, my opinions, my little spark of creation. I mean, and I want to be famous for the things that I care about. So
I want people to know my name.
is there a little ego? Actually, I have to admit, there's definitely some ego involved. I'm not
Absolutely.
going to deny that. Yeah, like, I think I'm a bit of an attention addict for sure. Like, I like being the center stage. I like everyone noticing me. But at the same time, I want that through means that I believe in, not just for. There's a lot of ways to get famous, and most of them I'm not willing to do. But if I could get famous or be well known for adding light to the world, I'd love that. I mean, maybe I'll evolve to a much more higher level of thinking later in my life, but for now, I'm okay with that.
Okay. Well, what is it about being famous or well known that intrigues you?
Mm, ego.
It's just purely ego.
No, that's not entirely true. But like, I'm not in denial that, yes. That's when I had a conversation with my cousin. And I said, "Why do people get into politics?" He's like, "Ego." He's like, "Tell me when it's not ego." Well, some people want to be like public servants. He's like, "Really?" It's like, how often do you think they don't have just a little bit of that? They want everyone to know, you know, everyone to see their name. Like, there's a lot of guys that serve the public, but when you get into politics, like, I think almost without any exceptions, it's because of ego. And I don't think it's always bad, but I do think that we kind of crave. I don't know. I actually think it's partly because I came from a big family. Like, I really think that's a very large part of it. I kind of crave attention that for that reason. Um, why I want to be famous. I want to be like that sweet spot famous. I don't want to be so famous that if I slap someone on stage, that's all the media talks about for the next week. Like, that's not the kind of famous that I want to be. You know, like,
Just
I really
B-level
just, I feel
famous.
so bad for celebrities, dude.
Oh,
Like,
yeah.
you were always, everything you do is just micromanaged. And even some of my favorite podcasters are just too famous that I just feel bad for him. I listened to this Joe Rogan podcast and he's like, yeah, I can't go anywhere. He's like, he said, it's ridiculous. I go to a grocery store and everyone wants to stop taking a picture with me. He's like, I don't, and I mean, in his mind, I guess, and with a lot of people, they don't want that. I mean, they're like, I just love what I do, you know? So
Hmm.
there was
Hmm.
never the desire to be to get a lot of attention. So I kind of be that sweet spot where people, it's an impact thing. I mean, I think that's what it is. I want to feel like I'm doing good in the world, and having that platform to add my voice to, I would feel would be meaningful. I don't know. What about you?
I was gonna say I want you to be famous because I know that you have a light, you have a just great personality, presence, and more people need that. So I mean, yeah, you probably have some ego, but uh, and I've just inflated it a little bit more. But uh, yeah, I think that being well known is, well, I think the base desire needs to be like doing what you love, right? Like
Yeah.
podcasting, loving to podcast, loving to chat. I mean, have a semi
Mhm.
meaningful conversation, for example. It's really
Yeah.
fun. And if anything comes of it, great. And if nothing, if just
Yeah.
even one or two people listen in and gain some insight or feel like they um, relate with you or with me, I mean,
Yeah.
that's worth it to me. But there also is the desire to reach more people, to have more impact, to
Yeah.
um, yeah, just have more of a voice, especially coming from a large family, or myself with a kind of different story. I don't know. It just
Yeah. And of course, when I say that, I'm being fairly facetious. I mean, there was a day that I kind of just woke up one day and I said it. I was like, what's the one thing you could do for the rest of your life and probably really love? And I thought, podcasting. And not because podcasting is anything in of it, like is inherently anything special. It's just that if I had the ability to do anything, it'd be just influence people to be good. That's it. Like that's sincerely, like if I could make money doing something I believe in so completely, you don't ever have to worry, man, I hope that what I'm doing is what I'm doing right. Is it the right, it's something I've always felt drawn towards is I want to be a voice that talks about some of those hard subjects and adds, I think, a moral level to it. I'm not a great person. I'm an okay guy, but I do have a lot of strong beliefs about certain values that I think are not talked about enough, and certain ideas that are not discussed enough. And I'm like, if I could just have my whole life talking about that, I would be a very happy person, famous or not famous. I mean, I joke a lot about being famous because sure, everyone to some degree wants to be, but sincerely, I think you're spot on. Even if I only reached a couple people. Well, speaking of which, with my other podcast, the Brunson Experience,
mm,
link below. I'm kidding. Um, this other podcast that I had this lady message me, and it was super funny because she thought I was like some big name. Like when people see you have a podcast, like, oh wow, you must have like a whole studio. Do you have like your own recording labels? Like, no, I literally am making this. Like, if you guys could see the room I'm in right now, you'd be very unimpressed. Um, but that's the funny thing is you can hide behind that a little bit. But it was funny. This lady messaged me after I put my Instagram, and so for those of you who don't know, like when I started my first podcast, it was my iPhone and voice memos. That was it for like the first 30 episodes. I would just wake up in the morning and go, hey, here's some thoughts I had. And I shared some stuff. And of course, the things that I learned as a kid, most of the world doesn't hear about. I mean, we were taught fundamentally about honesty in a way that I've learned that most families aren't. We were taught about character, and that was a huge topic in our family, and some really strong core values were deeply in place in my mind. So I was just sharing those kind of things. I was like looking at the world around me, going, because again, I came from a home that was very strong character focus, very high honor focus, and going into a world that was very different than that. And so I was just sharing my beliefs. I was like, well, what about this? And what about that? And I was asking questions and sharing this. So this one day I created an Instagram. I had a few posts on there, and I get a DM, and I'm like, wonder who that's from, right? I opened up at some lady I'd never even heard of before, and she sent me this giant message. I was like, what the heck? And I start reading it, and she's like, hey, I know you'll probably never read this yourself, but if you can tell Brunson how meaningful his podcast has been to me, I've listened to every episode. It's completely like changed the way I look at the world. I mean, she went on and on and on for like 2 paragraphs about how
Wow.
impactful my podcast had been for her. I look at their photos and she looked really rough around the edges, right? Like just a really rough looking character. And I'm like,
Mhm.
man, you seem like you came from a rough place. And so for her, what I was saying was kind of revolutionary. She's like, man, I've never thought that. I mean, like the 7 habits, right? Very, very intuitively, like it's a very intuitive thing. The 7 habits of highly effective people. Um, Seek first to understand, then to be understood. Everyone that hears that goes, oh yeah, that makes a lot of sense. But to apply, it's very different. And to talk about it, it's not talked about. Instead, it's just fight for your voice, you know? So I'm sharing these kind of ideas, and this lady just has such a powerful experience with it. So, anyways, long story short, that's kind of what got me like a bit of the bug, was that one little experience. And then I've had since then tons of people reach out to me about my podcast. And one of them was just an episode about dating. Another episode was about my faith. Another episode was about how I was trying to deal with adversity in my life. I mean, just little things like that. That's when I realized, oh yeah, this is something I could really do and find a lot of meaning in.
Wow. That's really cool. I've had those type of moments where just one message comes in, and it just makes everything worth it, you know? I
Yeah.
remember, uh, I've had so many times where I'll work so hard on a video or or anything and just spend hours and hours on it, you know? And then nothing happens. Like, it'll get a couple of views
Yeah.
and, well,
Don't change that.
cool. Just spent all that time for, but it's okay for me because I love it. There's that part of the ego, I guess, that wants views, that wants attention and everything like that, and you want to be rewarded for the time and effort that you put in for something, putting in a bunch of time for a reel or anything, you know. um you want that attention, but
Right.
sometimes it doesn't come. But then there will be sometimes just one comment or one message that comes in and says, this really meant a lot, or I love this. And
Hmm.
then it's all of a sudden worth it. You're like, okay, cool.
Right.
I brightened somebody's day for just a little bit. And if that's all that came from it, then cool. I love the experience, and that's all I need. So
Yeah. Well, something else I was kind of thinking about alongside of that. I mean, for one, I mean, you've been producing content way, way longer than I have. And, um, you know, it's kind of, I think it's kind of your family culture too, is that your whole family loves to put out good stuff. I mean, just for lack of a better word. I mean, that's, I think, very deeply ingrained in your family. Um, my family consumes a ridiculous amount of content, mostly movies. We watch so many movies. And this is something I started realizing. So I'm curious what your take is on this, but um, I am beginning to think that we have completely reshaped our entire perceptions because of the movies we watch. For instance, I found myself watching a movie during a really hard romantic point in my life where I was trying to make some decisions. And the movie had, you know, one of the characters was asking for advice about this guy that she's dating, and they started talking. And I found myself tuning in as though as though I was listening to a good friend.
hmm.
And I was actually like internalizing their advice. And then like looking back now, I was like, that was such toxic advice. I mean, that was purely for entertainment, but um, or people that watch The Notebook.
Oh, oh, yeah.
It's so bad. Okay, like I think we're gonna lose half of our listeners just by saying this, but I'm saying it anyways. The Notebook is the worst movie ever made, and it's not because. And I have to say this as well. Like I love watching it with a date because it's like a really mindless, like fun show for me.
Uh,
But if you actually think about it for even like 0.2 seconds, it's an awful movie.
it's terrible. The message is terrible.
So bad.
The approach is terrible.
Yeah.
The ending
So
is
bad.
terrible.
Yeah. It's like, and the whole, I mean, as you know, the whole theory behind it is there's one person out there for you. And if you can't have them, you're not to blame for becoming a drunk. I mean, there is layers of things that are so messed up about that
There are
movie.
so many messages. Even just how it started, it was so unnatural and just creepy how he approached the girl and tries to go on that first date. It's just like, what were you thinking by saying yes?
Yeah.
Yeah, it just pushes a lot of a lot of motives and narratives that I just don't like.
Yeah, well, that was a
Goodbye,
big
half of our viewership.
yeah. Well,
Whatever.
the one that really gets me is that after he realizes that he can't have her, he becomes a drunk,
Mhm.
finds some mistress to move in with him who he hooks up with constantly, and he's completely justified because he lost the love of his life. It's like, and I don't think everyone's like, oh, that was okay, he did that, but it's like, oh, but we totally understand him, and he was in love. It's like, it's so bad, man. And then he meets her and he steals her. Oh, and then I think he like sleeps with her while she's engaged to someone else. And
Yeah.
but it's okay because it was true love. Like all bets are off because it's true love, you know. So you can cheat on someone as long as it's true love, you know.
What a mess.
Marriage doesn't mean anything, commitment doesn't mean anything, honor doesn't mean anything. It's all about true love. So messed up.
So you're
But I
saying
think,
content we have been internalizing kind of changes our perception.
yeah, like infidelity is going up a lot. I mean, a ton. In fact, they more and more studies are coming out, and I think it's in humans' nature to somewhat, like, people have been cheating forever, but I do think that we have hyper normalized it. Marriage really does not mean a lot to a lot of people. I mean, it really is. It's a very vague commitment. Um, and I look at it as one of the most important things ever. It's like, it's probably the most important promise you'll make as a human being in your life. And yet our media tells us that it's okay to have a moment of weakness, or oops, or, you know, whatever. And and the big one too is that if you're not in love, it doesn't count. Like if you and your husband are not in love, I mean, there's just so many movies about that, goodness, like
Mm-hmm.
where the husband and wife are not in love, and so the one cheats, and it's like, oh well, and then the husband's like, well, honestly, I guess we're not in love, so oh
Mm-hmm.
well. The commitment means nothing. I mean, it's like that's the point of marriage. Like
Yeah.
why else get married except to say yes when we're not in love? That means that we're going to fight to become more in love. So yeah, everyone's very subjective about their emotions and how we look at love as a feeling and love is not a verb. And I've always thought that's way more important. You know, you love, the feeling comes after love the verb, you know.
Hmm. Oh, I like that. I haven't heard that before.
And it's another Stephen Covey thing. Big fan of Stephen Covey.
So how many times have you read Seven Habits?
Read and listened to probably close to 20.
Nice.
Over and over. It's more like a dictionary or an encyclopedia now. Whenever I got a question that I'm like, what did the book say about this? And I'll go back to it and kind of review some principles and apply it.
That's great. What you were saying about how it's kind of been ingrained in you and just kind of normal to talk about those sort of things or learn about those sort of things, and then for somebody who came from a rougher background with not as much exposure to all that, uh, it's just interesting how those ideas and concepts just come super naturally to you,
Mm-hmm.
because you've been studying it. You've been, I mean, input determines output, right?
Right.
All these things that you've been putting in your brain, and then you're able just to have them come out when they're needed, you know.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, can I share something real quick about
Oh, yeah.
experience I had yesterday, 2 days ago? um somebody was somebody came to me saying that they were feeling a lack of motivation,
Mm-hmm.
and they asked what I do to stay motivated. And I was literally like, I just had a podcast episode about that, and it got me thinking about, okay, what are the things that I do to stay motivated, and what can I do better? And just because we had talked about this and sharing our ideas and getting it on the front of my mind, I was able to instantly just be able to say, here are some things, and kind of talk through it, and yeah, just the input helps fill our brains, and then we were able to speak what we just learned and help. So
Mm-hmm.
yeah, filling our
Well,
mind.
I'm curious now though. What did you tell that person?
I literally told him about what you had said about minimizing your amount of willpower,
Mm-hmm.
from one of our earlier episodes. Just doing things that get you out of bed quicker, and just make certain routines. Told him about a money pact. Actually, he's got a money pact with me right now.
Nice.
He's reading a book, and if he doesn't read one chapter per day, he'll send me $10. So Yeah, kind of
Little business venture there for Cal.
little bit.
Teach a man to fish, or give a man a fish, you feed him for a day. Teach a man to fish, you missed out on a wonderful business opportunity to get paid $10 a day over a day. He doesn't, something like that. I think that's how the
I
proverb
think
goes, right?
that's the quote.
Yeah, that's funny. No, I think there is something with, well, that's okay. So here's another funny thing. I have a lot of friends who are mega wealthy. Yeah. I know people.
I
You
don't.
better do right by me. No, it's funny because I've been around people who are ultra wealthy. A lot of them actually just family friends and stuff. A lot of self-made millionaires. There was one guy in particular that really stood out to me. His father is just ridiculously wealthy, more money than he could spend in lifetimes. And he was raised with a very, very strict, like, I was like, did your dad ever help you out? He's like, absolutely not. He's like, he did not give me $1 my entire life. I was like, okay, but he's like, no, seriously. He's like, he was such a big believer that it would corrupt us. And he's pretty much said, like, I'll always be there for you as a father. But he said, he gave him a loan, I think at like a ridiculous high interest rate. He's like, so, yeah, so it's super funny because he was in debt to his father more than he's like, I got screwed by my dad, who's
Really?
rich, because his dad didn't ever want him to feel like, his dad wanted to be very, very sure that he never got rich because of, his dad's money. So the funny thing is this guy actually became very, very wealthy. And I realized, I'm like, well, it wasn't the money, because again, his dad did not just like lend him money. It was at an interest rate, and it was much higher than the bank would have done it for. His dad didn't give him anything. Like, there was nothing in particular, but I did realize it was the mindset. He was raised in a home where they were taught to think about money a certain way, and naturally he produced wealth out of that. And I've become more and more a believer of this, that for example, you go around people that are gym rats, they don't think in terms of, oh, this really sucks. It's just life. Like, I mean, it's as simple as getting up in the morning and brushing your teeth. They just go to the gym for 2 hours. Like that's just part of the way they live. So I think that when you're talking about that input side, when your brain gets rewired for certain things, it's a natural evolution. The fight goes away so much. For me, I mean, it's just habits, right? But for me as well, I was raised in a home where my dad, I think my dad maybe yelled at me one time my entire life. He's a very calm person, very patient, very quick to listen, very slow to accuse, very, very good father. But as a result of that, I have found myself naturally being a de-escalator. And I'm a bit of a hothead in some ways, but our whole family, because of the way we were raised, we have a natural instinct to de-escalate things rather than escalate. The idea of just getting into a fight just because is really foreign to me and my siblings. Because like our dad, we could never see our parents getting into just a fist fight. Like, that would be so bizarre. We go to another home, right, where that was normal, then the kids are the same way. So it's like, and it's not even about your upbringing. It's about the people you surround yourself with. It's the kind of thoughts you choose to entertain. But I've rewritten my brain in several ways, right? Anyway, so going all the way around, what I'm saying is, like, you're right about that input. When you deliberately program your brain, or you surround yourself with the right kind of people, and this is not a new idea, but 100% that begins to affect every part of your life. It's you don't have to fight as much. You don't struggle to go to the gym. You just go because it's like, what else would you do? So
Yeah. I've experienced this so much with everything. I mean, with books, with times in my life when I'm not filling my head with good things, and or really any sort of useful information, and then you try to
right.
talk and it's just like and you feel like there's nothing in your head. But I've noticed, for example, I trade stocks. I watch a certain YouTuber for information and stuff. And I've noticed that it's kind of just my habit now that I'll tune into his live stream for a few hours every day, maybe 2 hours, have his voice going in the background. And I've noticed I start to talk like him or act like him. And
Yeah.
I think I'm not really sure about data on it or if it's actually true, but have you heard that couples start acting like each other the more that they're together, or even start to look similar?
I have not heard that, but I could absolutely believe it. I could absolutely believe it.
Yeah.
I mean, yeah, I mean, like I lived away from home for a little while, and it's funny. I picked up a lot more characteristics from my other friends, and then I came home and I realized, whoa, I don't fit in. Like it's interesting how
Hmm.
much we're all really chameleons to some degree or another. I mean, we all evolve and adapt to whatever situation we're in. So, but that's what's cool about content, though. Right now, we live in a world where you can literally choose your friends, right? I mean, it's always been that way to some degree. I
Hmm.
mean, people will tell you, yeah, my mastermind includes Abraham Lincoln. Why? Because I read every book he ever wrote, and I literally go consult his works when I have hard questions. So it makes sense you'd start to think like Abraham Lincoln. But today, what's really cool is that you can get on live streams with people. You can ask them questions live. You can read every ounce of content every day. They're posting something that's probably inspiring or something that's their thought pattern. I actually on my Instagram, for all those that are wondering, yes, I have muted everybody on Instagram, including my own family. I,
Really?
I literally I don't watch almost any content. Like the only time I'll ever see something is if I look at that profile specifically, or if if they send me a message and I see their story and I watch the story. Like, I mean, I really don't consume almost any Instagram content except Russell Brunson, Tom Bilyeu, Tony Robbins, Daily Stoic. Like the stuff that I've chosen, it's like my mastermind group. And it's funny because that's all that I see when I'm on Instagram now. That's all I see is just people producing content, not those consuming it. So it's like I'm following content, major content producers who are producing content similar to stuff that I want to produce. So, anyways, that's a cool
Interesting.
thing too that we have in our society.
I'm extremely offended, but that is interesting and congratulations.
Like I posted a picture of us together. You never responded. I've actually had that happen a couple times. Like you never even like commented on the picture we posted. Like I posted of you and I'm like, oh, I'm sorry. Never saw it. Or
Oh,
someone was like, hey, your sister posted that picture. I'm like, what picture? Like, yeah, she posted like yesterday. It's like, I never saw it. I had someone actually like, you don't follow your own sister. That's pretty messed up. And I'm like, just can't be distracted. I got a lot of siblings. If I
how long
watched
have you
all their
been doing
content, that's 13 people,
it? True. How long you been doing that?
Probably almost a year and a half.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah. And like I'll like whenever I add new friends, I have to mute them individually. So it kind of keeps adding up. But no,
Hmm. Side note, I forgot to start a timer, and I believe we're about out of time.
I would guess so. Well, whether we are or not, I guess should we wrap this thing up?
Let's wrap it up. Any final thoughts? This has been great.
That has been good. I would say that if I mean, okay, so this is a last big philosophy. I've got a lot of these big philosophies, my rules of life, but one of them is that we all take turns being the student and the teacher. And anyone that thinks they're just a student is going to always have Ophelia syndrome, and who thinks they're just a teacher is always going to be like pompous. So we all take turns. I would say right now, like I mean, I'm listening to content all the time of people just soaking it up and taking notes, kind of thing. Right now, that I would say that if you're listening to this podcast and you're trying to figure out, man, how to start to shift some of these things in my brain, my experience has been just start surrounding yourself with good people. I mean, we've talked about what motivation is. Motivation really doesn't last very long. Just put yourself in the right circumstances, get yourself around the right people, start consuming the right content, and you're going to find that your mind slowly begins to shift to the right way. So
Yes,
that's
yes,
my two
yes.
cents.
I'd say that was 3 cents, maybe even 4.
Heck, let's call it a nickel.
Well, there's your nickel of the day, guys. Uh, we'll end it here. So, thanks for listening.
Take care.
Peace.